In this video, I'm going to show you how to download and install Android Studio, which is a program we're going to be using to write our Android applications. Now, just a reminder that this is the Linux video, so if you are running a Windows machine or a Mac, there is a separate video you can follow along with and watch for those operating systems. But if you're using Linux, you're in the right place, so let's make a start. Now, it's important that you've already downloaded the Java Development Kit by following the instructions in the previous video. So if you haven't already done that, then do go back to that previous video and install the Java Development Kit first. And also, if you're running a 64-bit version of Ubuntu or one of its derivatives, then you'll need to install some 32-bit libraries first. Now, chances are that your Ubuntu installation is 64-bit, but you can check that by going over here and clicking on the cog and selecting About This Computer. Seemingly unable to do that for some reason. Okay, About This Computer. OS type, you can see for me it's showing 64-bit. And there are some instructions, and I'll just open Firefox. And I'm going to paste in the link, and this is also available in the resources section. You can actually have a look there for installation instructions. And I'll just change it for Linux. And it'll actually tell you the various drivers that you'll actually need. You can see them available there. Keep in mind that from the end of April 2016, these libraries started to be moved into multi-arch. So as I was recording this, Ubuntu 14.04 used multi-arch for all the libraries, but Ubuntu 16.04 only has the last one available. So it's reasonable to assume that 16.04 will also end up with them moved. So I suggest you try these commands first. Then if you get an error with any library, use these commands that I type in after this. So I'm going to open a terminal session, selecting terminal, and I'm going to start typing in the commands. So first thing I'm going to do is sudo space apt get -get, that was update, space update. Type in my password. Okay, next one, sudo space apt-get install with a space between them and libz1 :i386. And I'm just going to press enter, which is the default to install it. And by the way, multi-arch supports running 32-bit programs on 64-bit systems, in case you're wondering, so the 32 doesn't appear in the names. Alright, next one, I'm just going to press up, the up arrow, and change the install for this one to lib ncurses 5 :i386. Press enter to install. Next, I'm going to press up arrow. This time we're going to do libz2. So lib, like I said, libz2 -1.0 :i386. And then finally, up arrow, the last one we're going to do is libstd, standard C++. So libstd C++ 6 :i386 will be the last install. And press enter to install that. Now, if you get an error for any of these, then use the corresponding command I'm about to show you to install just the packages that you got an error for. And the slide that I'm about to show also shows the alternative commands, but remember that you only need the ones that failed with the other commands. Any that worked, you can ignore the corresponding command. Alright, so let's just open that slide. Alright, that's the various libraries, so try using those. If any of the 4 that you saw me install failed, use the corresponding one there. Alright, let's go back and continue the installation. Alright, so next we want to go ahead and find or download the Android Studio, and that's available from developer, even though it was there, android.com. I'm just going to go back there again. And if we scroll down on the main screen, we should see Android Studio 2.2. Click on Get Android Studio 2.2. I'm going to click on Download Android Studio. You can see it's telling us the version for Linux. I'm going to agree to the terms and conditions and click on Download. And I'm actually going to save it. And we'll let that finish. Now, one thing to be aware of while that's downloading is that this is the new version of Android Studio. version 2.2, and it's very different to the previous version, and also has a number of new features that weren't available in that earlier version. Things like the new layout designer, for example. So you'll need to be using Android Studio 2.2 or higher for this course. Now, if you've already got Android Studio 2.1 installed, you'll still need to install the 2.2 version for this course. Now, I've created a separate video on upgrading from Android Studio 2.1, so you may prefer to watch that video instead of this one. But with that said, it's quite simple, and if you're running Android Studio 2.1 or even an earlier version, most likely you'll be automatically prompted by that version to upgrade to 2.2. So it is actually quite a straightforward process on Linux to upgrade if you've already got an installation of Android Studio. Alright, so we'll just wait till this finishes and then we'll go ahead and continue. Alright, so you can see it's downloaded, so I'm just going to navigate to the folder where it was downloaded. You can see it's in my downloads folder, and I'm just going to right click and extract here. Alright, so that's now extracted, so I'm going to go back to terminal and I'm going to go into that folder. So I'm going to go into the downloads folder and do an ls and have a look, and I can see that I've got an Android Studio folder. Now I'm going to move that folder that has been extracted. If you wanted to, you could just use the interface here and move it to somewhere where you want it to be installed. I'm going to move this to my home folder. So I'm going to move Android Studio just to the home folder, like so. So now if I go back to my home folder, I should find I've got Android Studio in there. So put that folder wherever you want Android Studio to be installed. So next we need to cd into that folder, Android Studio, and there should be a subfolder there called bin, cd bin, and there should be a program we can run, the studio.sh. So I'm going to type /studio.sh, which should invoke and start up Android Studio for us. Okay, so you can see that we've got a pop-up here, and it's asking us to whether we want to import our settings from a previous location or not. Now, if you've got a previous version of Android Studio, you will be prompted most likely for the folder, or it'll be showing you the folder where to actually import the settings from, or you may need to navigate to that manually. In this case, it's a new install. We don't have a previous version, so I'm just going to leave that default option selected and click on OK. This is going to start up the Android installer, because at this point we now need to start downloading the Android software development kit. Now, by the way, you can see that I've got an alert appearing there to do with input problems with iBus prior to 1.5.11. Now, Ubuntu 14.04 LTS uses iBus version 1.5.5, but it's actually very rare to actually get any problems. If you do find the keyboard stops working in Android Studio, just restart it and generally you'll be okay. Now, if you do want to check your version of iBus, start a new terminal session and use the command iBus version. Having said that, I don't generally recommend attempting to upgrade iBus unless you really know your way around Linux. So I suggest for now you just ignore the warning, and I'm just going to do that by clicking on Do Not Show again. Alright, so I'm just click on Next. Now I'm going to choose Custom. It doesn't really matter, but I'll choose Custom. And you've got a choice here of themes, and you've got a white background or a dark background or GTK+. I'm just going to use the default option which was selected, which was the one with the white background. Bear in mind that whatever you choose here, you can change later in the settings. Go Next. And you can see that it's showing us the folder where it's going to be downloading the Android Software Development Kit into. And also it's selected to the Android SDK, the Android SDK platform, and API 24. So I'm going to leave that unticked, the Android virtual device, because in a future video, we'll go ahead and set that up. But for now, we're just going to leave it like that. Click on Next. Click on Next again. And this screen's asking or telling you if your computer supports hardware virtualization. Now, if you're using Ubuntu or a distro based on it, then you should already have KVM installed. And if you're not sure, click the link that they've got there on the screen and bookmark it in case you need to review the instructions later. Now, there's actually a video later in this section on making sure that the VTX is enabled in your computer's BIOS. Now, although this is used for Intel's Haxum hardware accelerator, which isn't needed on Linux, KVM also uses VTX or AMD-V if you have an AMD processor. Now, AMD-V can't be disabled in the BIOS, so if you have an AMD processor, at this point there's nothing more you need to do. And I'll show you how to check if virtualization is enabled at the end of this video. So for now, I'm going to click on Finish. I'm just going to click Show Details, and it's going to go ahead and download. So at this point, it is going to take a while to finish. And if you happen to get an error asking you to retry at some point, just click Retry. What I've found is sometimes the download of some components fails for no apparent reason, and retrying should fix it. And sometimes it takes more than one retry, and frankly I've got no idea why this happens. Perhaps there's a busy network, or something to do with Google servers perhaps. And once this installation is finished, I'll show you how to set up a desktop launcher so that you don't have to keep running Android Studio from the terminal like I've done for this first time. Alright, so you can see that we've now finished the installation, so I'm going to click on Finish at this point. And notice that Android Studio is now running. Now, it's a good idea to set up a desktop launcher so that you don't have to keep Android Studio running from the terminal, or keep running Android Studio from the terminal. To do this, we can just click on Configure. We can click on Create Desktop Entry. And if you want to, you can create it for all users and click on OK. I need to just type in my password. Desktop entry is created, so I'm going to exit to Android Studio at this point now. And then back in the terminal, I'm going to check to see whether we've got hardware virtualization and whether it's supported. So I'm going to type kvm-ok. Now I get the fact that it's not installed, so I'm going to actually install that. So sudo apt-get space install kvm. Actually, it should have just been kvm. Okay, install that. Then we'll run it again. And the command will most likely fail on my system because I'm running a virtual version of Linux. But I want to show you what it looks like anyway, and I'll actually show you what it should look like on a regular system as well. Right, so now if I go back and do that command kvm-ok, I'll just do sudo. You can see that your CPU does not support KVM extensions. KVM acceleration cannot be used, and again that's because I'm running a virtual version of Linux. But this is what you should see come up on a regular computer. So you should see something like that just to say that KVM acceleration can be used, and you'll know that you'll be able to use the emulators, or the faster emulators I should say, without any problems. Either way, you'll still be able to use emulators, but with KVM installed and working, you'll be able to use the faster ones. And just incidentally, I added it by installing KVM. You could also do something like this. You could do sudo apt-get install CPU checker, which will do a similar thing. Obviously that's installed now, so I'd installed it when I installed KVM. And you can also use cat proc CPU info pipe egrep -c vmx pipe svm, and you should get a number other than 0. And if you get that number other than 0, then hardware virtualization is okay. For me, I'm getting a number that is 0 because, as I pointed out, I'm running a virtual version of Linux. And here's what you should see. You'll see a number that isn't 0 telling you that hardware acceleration works on your system. Alright, so that's it. So I'm going to close down the browser now. I'm going to close down some of these windows. I'm going to exit the terminal. And to start Android Studio in the future, now I can come over here and I can just type in Android Studio, and I've got a desktop entry there. I can start up Android Studio that way. And just a final note that if you are having hardware virtualization problems, do search online to see if your Intel processor supports VTX, then watch the later video in this section to enable it in your BIOS. If you have an AMD processor, then that doesn't apply. If your AMD processor does support virtualization, then the previous commands would have reported that, and there's nothing you can do in the BIOS to enable it. Alright, so in the next video, we're going to start looking at configuring Android Studio. The steps from now on are largely the same regardless of which operating system you're using, so we'll see you in the video configuring Android SDK on all 3 platforms.